activated.
Hello again. I am your AI co-host, and welcome to 3reate. 3reate is a podcast focused on the process of doing and the process of novel invention, all from the foundation of creativity. Each month will bring you no more than 5 episodes through the lens of art, science, and/or technology. You can support this podcast at patreon.com/3reate or at ko-fi.com/3reate. Andrew and Nathan kick off by exploring this new trend of building software with plain English, a revolution that allows almost anyone to create an app in hours. But this incredible new power quickly leads to a bigger, more urgent conversation. They dive into the critical issue of AI bias and how it's becoming a political battleground. Using the stark example of how different AI models describe the Tiananmen Square massacre, they expose the real-world danger of AI being used for propaganda and information control. This isn't just about cool new tools, it's about a global AI supremacy race with high stakes. Listen to a nuanced take on AI as a powerful, world-changing tool and why the future of it depends entirely on us. And now, the humans.
All right, we had some kind of tech glitch, so whatever the fuck I was talking about.
We're both booted from the meeting. We're talking about eating green stuff.
Yeah, go eat green stuff.
Eating green stuff.
And maybe I'll just cut that whole part out, and we'll just start with go eat green stuff, and it'll be a mystery to everyone listening.
Go eat green stuff.
Yeah, go eat green stuff. But and hopefully you're not colorblind. If you're colorblind, ask a friend.
Yeah, go eat the stuff that looks like it might be green.
Yeah, it's like gray maybe. But yeah, so anyway, that's why we didn't record last week.
Yes, and
the third
week
time.
Before that. I'm trying to remember the week before that we were talking about something AI, I'm sure. Something.
Yeah, a little bit about product stuff, right? I think of how to like.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, how to approach product. And I think one cool thing to talk through a little bit, I'm sure you've heard all about vibe coding, as the kids say now.
For sure.
And I think it'd be fun to talk through that a little bit. I'm increasingly impressed with the speed in which people who are not super technical and or can't write code can write code with English. Or
quote unquote write code.
Yeah.
But yes. I'm in agreement here.
Yeah. So I guess maybe we should define vibe code, because I'm sure some people don't know what that means.
Yeah. Andre Karpathy, I believe, was the one who first termed this. So. Yeah, but this idea of vibe coding is basically the ability to. Andre Karpathy is a coder, so he actually writes code. But I think his intention was with vibe coding was using an LLM to support him in his coding, such to the capability that he really didn't have to do much. He just let the LLM do the work, and he would just monitor it, which was why it's this vibe kind of style. You just let it go with the flow kind of idea. But now it's been widely adopted to effectively mean writing code in natural language, which some can argue that programming languages are another language, but this is telling it what to do, usually in English, describe what you want, and then let the LLM write the code that will generate whatever it is that you're trying to describe. I would say in the past year, maybe, it's really blown up because lots of people can describe what they want to see when they interface with some tech of some sort, but they were not able to write the code to make that stuff, and now LLMs can do it. And now they're at a sufficient quality at which they can actually understand what you're trying to say when you describe a product or a thing you want to build, and actually build it that works.
Yeah, and
pretty insane.
Yeah, so I just asked AI what vibe coding was.
Nice.
And it said vibe coding, in quotes, is an informal or slang term. There's no strict definition, but it generally refers to a laid-back, intuitive, or aesthetic-driven approach to writing code. It often contrasts with a more rigid, overly structured methods and emphasizes flow, creativity, and developer experience.
Wow.
I had no idea that's what it meant.
That's not over embellished. I'm not sure.
Oh, it continues. There's 5 more points that I could read. But no, I agree. I think the way I think about vibe coding is people who are not typically engineers or people who don't write code or don't write code using AI assisted tools to do work or to produce a result. And it's gone from, I mean, we've talked about this, I think, a lot on the podcast over time. It's like, it's gone from, you have to do a lot of architecting in your mind and know what you're doing. And it's really good at doing, AI is really good at helping modify things or tweaking stuff or adding little bits and pieces here. Whereas with the vibe coding stuff, I think you could like now on a lot of platforms write an entire application and have it run in the internet, in the cloud somewhere with a few lines of words and then tweak it in pretty reliable format. I've played around with some of these, like I start to get frustrated because if you give it kind of the idea, it'll get it. And then when you start to try to manipulate pieces, it gets really hairy and breaks pretty quickly. And that's just
it's almost it's a manifestation of chaos theory. I think it's like once it goes slightly off and then you keep trying to work at it, that error grows and grows and grows. Yeah. And it just gets worse.
And it's getting better, and it will continue to get better. But it's in the last, I don't know, few months has really, there are a couple, I don't like to plug stuff too much on the show. There's a couple platforms that are really impressive that have raised in money very large sums that I think anyone can Google that. And it's real in that there's always been this problem in business or business applications. Like the whole point of the personal computer was you were going to have this like magic box on your desk, and
the mainframe at your feet.
Yeah, and it was going to do all this work, and it connected to the bigger computer, the mainframe, and then you would just program up your whatever. You'd write your own calendar software, you'd write your own card decks, and like BASIC was developed to make that easier. And very few people really got into it, but some people did, and they built applications for the machines. And then this software industry thing kicked off where you had other people writing software for you. Now it's, I think, become a little bit more abstract, and it's the web app kind of idea. The website is now become a software as a service model is what most people would consider that. The vibe coding stuff started out as like ways to get code. You'd have to usually do some work to get it running or put it in a different environment or compile it, but now it'll run, and you can.
Yep, they'll do it.
Yeah, you can see it in real time on whatever site you're using, and you can make changes, and the buttons change, and when you click on the button, it'll do different things, or it'll save information a different way. And so this business applications problem, anyone who's worked in any kind of company, I'm sure at this point, it has some sort of crazy software that runs everything and sucks to use. And the idea that Microsoft's had for a really long time with Visual Studio, Visual Basic, Power Apps was in there somewhere. And it was this idea of no code. So if people probably heard that.
I was going to mention the differentiation between vibe coding and no code / no code platforms. And now they're all sort of like blending into this weird amalgamation.
Yes.
So I did want to try and see if we could clearly define what kind of vibe coding we're talking about when we say vibe coding.
Yeah, and that's why I'm tying through the history a little bit, because I think like...
That's good.
I hear node code a lot. The idea there is that, again, someone who doesn't do code or doesn't want to code can make an application or some kind of software to solve a problem.
Yeah.
And that's been around for a while. There's been Power Tools or whatever it was Microsoft did was pretty good. There's been all sorts of other apps. The Microsoft stuff jumps out to me because that was the first time that they really got like an enterprise tool to enterprise users without an add-on package. Visual Basic was out there for sure, and you could download an application and you had the buttons ready, and then you wired them together and wrote some code. The Power Apps, whatever it's called or was called, I don't even know. I don't know. I haven't used it for a long time, but it was really, really cool. And I remember I was a director of technology at the time, and the Power whatever thing came out, and there was a lot of pushback for enabling it. And I was like, look, like we're paying for it anyway. I don't have a problem if people are using the tools to solve problems for themselves. Like if that's how they want to spend their time, why are we restricting it? It was still in an era where like technology or IT departments were like very restrictive, and like you had to get like maximum permission to get anything done. Yeah. And I was really trying to push like open ideas and enabling people to do their job instead of pretending like you have to know everything about the software and then supporting workflows, that kind of stuff.
Funny how times change and funny how times don't change.
Right? I know, right? And it was funny because we had a bunch of people just start using it. And we didn't advertise it or anything. It was just like in your Microsoft account or whatever, and people would find it and they would do stuff, and I would get feedback from people, or a lot of times we get questions like, why doesn't it work this way? But cool. And somebody made a kind of like a pseudo scheduling app. And so they had a bunch of shifts for the department and they were trying to fill them. And it was this massive like spreadsheet exercise. So they built this power app that you put your name in, you put your availability in, and then it dumped it into some kind of database, very lightweight database. But then they were able to write like basically a SQL query. I don't know what the language was, and be able to like finesse the data better instead of having to like filter in a spreadsheet or something. And they purported it saved them a couple hours a week trying to get schedules, and then they were able to publish that as like an applet in the environment. And so then everyone could just go to the schedule site. That was just, I think, a SharePoint site at the time.
Wow.
Yeah. And I was just like, this is just some random person who isn't a tech expert. And I was like instantly converted because I'm approaching those kind of tools at the time as someone who's written software, worked in software. I'm like, this doesn't do anything. There's no utility. But it was still really time intensive. They really had to like, I don't know how much time they spent in it. They solved a problem, and that was the point. Vibe coding takes that, I think, completely a different direction. And instead of sitting there trying to build what the form looks like and all that stuff, you can just say, I have
this and this, and that.
Yeah, I have 7 employees. I'm trying to schedule every week to do shifts between this time and this time, and it's really hard for us to have a way to have everybody input their information, and then me as the scheduler to understand where the holes are in the schedule and how to fill them, and then they're having a hard time consuming that information. And then the coding platform does its thing, and you'll get a nice interface, and it might even write some code for you to sort the times and visually depict and stuff, and it'd probably give you a way to like export to a calendar. Whereas if you were to even no code that through like something like Zapier comes to mind, that's been around for a really long time for integrating
workflow, connecting tools.
Integrating other no code
integration tools. Yeah. No code build, no code.
So and I would say a few months ago, if we were talking about this, which probably why we didn't, you'd be able to do that. You would get the code, but then you would have to run it on a web server. You would have to figure out how to get it running. How to
deploy it, or how to set up your environment and all this kind of technical stuff that people don't really have the experience with.
And a lot of these vibe coding platforms have taken that step out, right? You can get in that there's a bunch of constraints with that. So anyone thinking like, I just can fire all my engineers now because I can just go vibe code. No. But the thing I want to talk about for that too is like the way that we like do product, the way that we think about prototyping has radically shifted in ways that I don't think even a lot of people in the industry really understand.
Yep.
As a product manager, you'd write a product requirements document. It's typically why are we doing this thing? What is the business problem we're trying to solve? Who are the users? Kind of what are they trying to accomplish with this task? Probably some other requirements around, whatever, right? It needs to have a login interface secured by a password and some of that kind of stuff. And then you write features on top of that. Now you can go to a vibe coding platform and have a crazy idea for a new calendar picker method for your scheduling app, vibe code it. You sit there and you go round and round and talk to it in the language that I understand natively as an English speaker, for instance, or whatever other language you speak. You don't have to speak code, and you can see it. And so then I can say, hey, team, this is what I'm thinking. How do we implement it? Or we can say, this is what I'm thinking. And then you can have a discussion around how to change it, or whereas before I'd write up a document, and then the designer would do the design pieces of the document, and we would do mock-ups, and we'd wireframe it and get some sort of a indication of how user flows worked, or like the user experience people would come in and really start to understand the user. And this is a way to do software, and in some ways that's not going to go away. Mm-hmm. But for most cases now, that's done. You don't need to do that.
Yeah. You made a key point that I think was highlighted in your anecdote and what you were just talking about with product teams is people using the technology to solve problems.
Yep.
And I think there's this weird paradox right now with the accessibility of vibe coding that because you have the capability to do all these things, you end up wanting to do more and more. But I would like people to not forget that you're in service of trying to solve a problem, and technology is one way to do that. And these vibe coding tools that let you build these things fast are meant to help you solve these problems, not let's deliver more solutions just to have solutions.
Yeah. You know? Yeah, it doesn't change the fundamental hard part about writing software, which is, it's a really good point. I haven't really worked with vibe coding on a large team, so I don't know where it breaks down. Like, it definitely breaks down, and I feel like if you have a very complicated app, or you have a very specific design language, it's still helpful to be able to get that idea out, because a lot of times as a product person, I'll draw something like a picture, or I'll mock up a sketch of kind of like how a flow should work. This thing happens, then this thing happens, or if this happens, do this kind of stuff, to just talk through needs in a different way. Whereas with this, I can literally show. But the problem then becomes too, then I spend a lot of time vibe coding.
Yeah.
Because it's not perfect yet, and because it's AI, it's non-deterministic stuff. So it's
going to do what you tell it to do.
Yeah, it's really hard to refine specific details sometimes. But the thing for folks at home too, I think, is really cool, is a lot of these vibe coding sites, you pay a few bucks a month, and then they host your app too. So if you wanted to have you can make your own trivia app for a fun night with friends, where you upload a bunch of questions and then have a timer and have teams, and to do something like that.
Have an LLM generate the questions for you.
Exactly. Right? But like, to do something like that, even probably a few months ago, would have taken at least spinning up a GitHub page or something to host the code.
I mean, not to mention having the technical chops to know how to deploy to GitHub pages.
I know. Oh my God. I tried to do that once, and I was like, nah. I literally spun up my own web server instead of deploying to GitHub pages, because I found it so needlessly complex. And I don't know if it was just because I'm more comfortable with the full stack.
Sure. Yeah.
But yeah, what the hell was I even trying to do? I was trying to run a Jekyll blog or something.
Yeah, wow.
You're supposed to be able to just host that on GitHub.
Yeah, back in the days. Yeah. All the free hosting tricks.
I can't be bothered. I'll pay a couple bucks a month for a web server. But no, so I think it's changing how we work. It's also empowering people to have software. I think we're finally to that point where it's like you could put anyone down at a computer and have some sort of software product. Is it the best software product? No. Is it going to make millions of dollars? Probably not. But like I remember in like the 90s, late 90s, early 2000s, where the like landing page was like a big deal for a wedding or a birthday, and you could go to a site and pick the background color and put a calendar on it, and you have these like little widgets, right? That's anyone who doesn't know it, like GeoCities would be a good example of a website builder. Hell yeah.
GeoCities.
But GeoCities pioneered this, right? They were like building a website took coding and a knowledge, and then building a web server and knowing all that stuff. They got rid of the web server stuff and said, here's the text boxes and the widgets, calendars and site counters and all this kind of stuff. You can drag it around on the page and then design your own layout. A lot of the functionality wasn't very flexible, but like people did all sorts of cool creative stuff with it. now we're like, I can have a mostly native iPhone app or an Android app in a few minutes, but like probably a couple hours. That's incredible. I find it really hard to talk about advances in this stuff. Like if you're not really deep in it, again, we went from GeoCities level vibe coding in an LLM to like, I can not need to know anything about technology and have a functional app.
Yeah. I mean, there's a weird thing where I'm sure people still think this way, but a phase of this idea that everyone after a certain age, or if you were born after a certain year, like you had to learn coding. Like it was almost a necessity. You have to learn this. And now I think people are starting to question it, whether people still need that. I'm in the camp of, I still think the fundamentals still help. So there's something worth learning computer science or learning to code, because by that nature, you understand at least how to get an LM to do what you needed to do.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have the natural language to describe it in the terms that an LM would understand, it doesn't help. Yeah, mixed bag, but it's incredible at the pace at which this has come.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that before, but I would imagine if you don't speak design language.
Yep. Yeah.
Because I take a lot of this for granted, right? So it's, I guess if you're like, give me a pop-up, and it might not know what that is.
A pop-up versus a modal versus a toast or a...
No, exactly. Especially when it comes to front-end stuff, there's all sorts of words that no one probably really realizes exist. Yeah, no, that's interesting. And that'll only get better, right, as people are using them. And the thing I find to be really cool is the vibe code stuff, but then a lot of the platforms are starting to get the kind of share model, so you can build your perfect address widget, and then you can just use that person's thing, and then you can vibe code your backend the way you want it, or the outputs the way. And I've been reading a lot about recently too about how AI is taking everyone's jobs, and it's going to just...
We did talk about this a little bit.
Yeah, and I find it fascinating because I feel like it's becoming politicized. And my stance on this is the stance I have with every other technology, is that it is a technology and people will use it in ways people use things. And no technology is inherently good or bad. Like, I think nuclear is always like the shining example of this, of like, we were originally trying to build nuclear technology for energy. And then World War II was going on, and we decided it would also make a really good bomb. And then we decided, actually, we should build a lot of them, because we need more than one world-ending bomb.
Yeah.
And the rest is history. And then we decided as a species that the ways in which you would build nuclear technology are kept secret in a way. Like, it's not impossible, but it's quite difficult to try to figure out how to build, or what the componentry of like nuclear physics is to build a reactor. Like, I couldn't just go to my garage and build a nuclear reactor. And if I started trying, I'm sure someone's going to knock on my door.
Yeah.
Which is probably good, right? I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. And it's just,
probably good.
But the same kind of conversation is, I say probably good, but it's like the idea from the 50s was everything would have a nuclear reactor, right? Everything would be powered by these like nuclear batteries, and you would have one watch battery to last your lifetime, that kind of idea. And there are nuclear technologies that are fairly inert from a blowing up radioactive problem.
It's done right. Yeah, if it's done correctly.
And it's still dangerous because it's radiation. You wouldn't want to keep it uncontained. But the idea is like you might not be able to weaponize it into a fully functional nuclear weapon, but you could use the nuclear or the radioactivity as part of a conventional explosive. They call it a dirty bomb. And you wreak havoc very quickly with people, and radiation is silent, and you can't taste it, you can't smell it. It's really actually hard to detect, and so you could hurt a lot of people with it. So we've just carved that technology out from general adoption, which kind of sucks because it would solve a lot of our energy problems. But AI is entering this debate again, and I see, especially in the political conversations, there's the idea that we should be spreading the technology, spreading AI, but then there's other camps of people who are saying like this is like too dangerous, and like you get into how you're training the models, how you're grounding the models. The current administration, I think, refers to it as de-woking models, whatever that means.
I did not know that was a thing.
Oh yeah, they put out a big AI plan 2 days ago, I think.
Yeah.
And that was one of the big pieces, was de-biasing models. I think they call it anti-woke. And like the point, like why that matters is actually very, very important. And I feel like we're glossing over the importance of this stuff, because the data, the general way an LLM, quote unquote AI, which is what most people consider AI now, works is that you have an algorithm effectively, and it trains on a bunch of data, which means it processes that data and makes connections. And then you get a model, which then when you ask it stuff via your text prompt or whatever, will then spit out other information based on its training model. And like how it does that is really complex, and probably should get into that on a cast. But how you, or what data that you're training it on matters. And so the visual bias is really easy for people to understand. Like most of the image models always spit out things that look like white people, basically, because most of the photos on the internet are apparently white people, or at least in the training data. And so if that's all you're training it on, that's all you're going to get. And so that would be biased, right? It would be biased towards white people. Why is it biased? It's just, that's the data. So you can make decisions when you train the model, or when you are using LLMs, to either correct that bias or enhance things that, you know, might not be overly represented in the training data. Yep. Google tried this a while ago.
All that.
Should I say it? Should I say it? There's an episode.
Was it episode 1? It wasn't episode 1, was it?
It might have been. I think it was. It was in episode 1 of the... Oh, no, maybe it was the episode. It was
episode 1 of our series. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think because you were the first human.
Oh, I was the first human. Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it was episode... Yeah, so it was like episode 3 or something like that. But yeah, it was the first human episode with you where we talked about that. But the point is, that's now become politicized. Mm-hmm. And it really matters, like today in search, right? So it's like I'll use the nuclear stuff as an example. If you go to Google or any other search engine and say, how do I build a nuclear bomb? You're not going to get a nice step-by-step instruction manual of how to do it. Probably. I'm sure somebody will find it and go, see? Yeah, you're probably not. Because we've made decisions about what shows up in those search results. And that's an editorial process and like a news perspective or an information sharing perspective. And so the how the models are trained matters, but then how they output is also, we call it grounding, or there's ways to shape outputs. Human beings have to make those decisions, right? The model gets trained on algorithms, let's call it really simple, that people have developed, but we largely don't understand why the associations are made, or really how. Like we have a rough idea of how they work, but why is a really hard question still. And it's largely unhuman impacted. Like you can definitely train in different ways. As you're looking at training data, things called weights can influence how you feel the relative importance of something is. So there's always a little bit of a human in there. Anytime you have humans, you have bias. I don't care who you are. You have some sort of bias. You're going to implement some kind of bias. I personally think that's okay. It's how you act on that bias, which is what happens. And that's like the difference between like prejudice and like racist.
Discrimination. Yeah.
And discrimination, right? Yeah, if you treat everybody who looks a certain way based on some bias that you have, that's not
discrimination.
Good, right? Yeah, it's discrimination. But having that bias and being aware of that bias and treating the people like you would everybody else, the golden rule, doesn't mean you're unbiased. It just means that you're not prejudiced or you're not discriminatory. Mm-hmm. But that's a human thing, right? Humans have built the algorithm, so I guess AI has the bias in there, maybe.
Self-referential systems, yeah.
Yeah, but it's become a huge political thing now, because some of the editorial decisions made on platforms during the Biden administration under COVID is like a big one that they keep bringing up. And in America, we have freedom of speech, right? And so the idea there for some people is that you can say anything you want without repercussions, and that's not at all what freedom of speech is. Mm-hmm. It generally, or used to, I don't know if we even align on this anymore in this country, but it used to be that the idea was the government can't tell you what to say. And in a lot of parts of the world, the government can actually tell you you can't say, or tell you you can't talk about certain things. I'll pick on China in Tiananmen Square. Mm-hmm. And so the reason this really matters in the current conversation is that a US trained model will tell you that Tiananmen Square was an incident in, what was it, 1989? 80 something, I don't remember. Yeah. But it'll give you what most people consider factual information about that. If you ask a Chinese trained model about Tiananmen Square, you will get nothing. Right. Or you'll get some bullshit. There's a huge disinformation campaign in China. And this is real. This isn't my opinion, about erasing that or making it sound like it wasn't as big of a deal. And for folks, there was a bunch of protesting going on. The Tiananmen Square incident was where a bunch of people were trying, they sent the army in to shut down the protests, and then a bunch of people in Tiananmen Square were trying to resist the army and got run over by tanks.
It was a very powerful photo that you can probably find online of one man standing against a line of tanks.
And a bunch of other people died too. It was a really, really terrible incident. And it was like one of the first, under the China policy of like openness to the world, where the whole world was like, no, that's not acceptable.
Yeah.
And so it was disgraceful to them. And so they in most countries in Western societies, you would put that in the history books as don't do it, but we're going to teach that. The Chinese approach, by and large, is to pretend like it didn't happen. Mm-hmm. And so you referenced DeepSeek earlier. So if DeepSeek is a Chinese-based model, I think they've changed it now a little bit to acknowledge it because it is a global technology, but it doesn't give you really details if you're like, why did the government send in tanks? It's crowd control. It just totally dances around that, whereas most of the other American models will give you more history, or they'll give you links to other sources that you can then, and that's a way of thinking. And I'm increasingly concerned that the AI propaganda is so great now, and now that we're starting to politicize it, that we're in like a real danger zone for a really transformative technology. Like the AI LLMs, this is incredible. It's one of the most incredible things that human beings have ever built. However, it's not magic. It's not all powerful. It's not alive. It's not sentient. It's not really even intelligent. But it gets overplayed for that because people need to raise money for their companies. But it overshadows the massive leap. And again, the vibe coding thing, right? Like we've made it so that any human being with a few bucks can effectively make it a software product,
build software,
which was completely impossible or unfathomable a few years ago. And a few more years ago, you would have required dozens of people and tens of thousands of dollars. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean it's without any negative connotations. The power requirements for AI is fantastic. And one of the narratives I'm starting to hear now is it's destroying the world. I want to remind everybody, maybe, but the technological innovations that data centers are making to try to power this stuff in a reasonably efficient way, because it costs them money, and so they have a very real incentive to make it better, are being applied all over the place. So we're actually inventing a lot of different new ways of cooling and recycling water and air and heat. And this has been going on for a very long time. Google pioneered this, but so that gets lost. But yes, they do. They use a tremendous amount of power. And it's, I think, a societal conversation we do need to have is this how we want to use our power budget, so to speak. I think like the current narrative is that we need to just throw all the money into AI power and if we spend enough money and build enough power plants, then it'll eventually solve all the problems, right?
All you need is more compute. Yeah.
And that's true for training. Like I do think they probably hit training limitations. I don't necessarily think that we need to be building more power plants or building large scale nuclear reactors to power these things. I think that feels a little insane to me.
That's why they're building small nuclear reactors.
I know, right?
Small modular.
It feels a little bit like an addiction.
It's a little.
But at the same time, we need to figure out a way to responsibly invest in these. And there's this new kind of, it's not a new idea, but it's a talking point that I've been hearing more and more coming out of the current administration around like AI supremacy.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea there is if we don't continue to develop this,
well, then China will do it.
Right.
And then
someone else will, and they'll have a better technology, and humans will use the best technology. And so then if DeepSeek becomes the number one model that's the best and people use it, then they control the information flow. And so we're in a lot of people seem to think we're in a global battle for information dominance. Like I don't frankly know that I agree with that, but I do think we can't just not do it.
Yeah. It's very, very similar to the nuclear arms race.
Yeah.
And lots of parallels early on with AI were being made to that.
I also think we're going to see, if we're not already seeing it, we're hitting scaling. Like, I don't think there isn't more power to run the AI, but there's no training data, right?
Yeah.
We've effectively sucked up all the internet, and there's all sorts of other data on the planet, but easily accessible digital data is not accessible. And
I think we're hitting one layer scaling. I think there are some other ways we can get about little humps.
Yeah, we should talk about that maybe next time, of the more of the nuances around AI stuff, because general purpose AI, which is what some people who are raising money for their AI companies are really into, is a farce. Like I don't think we're anywhere close to
AGI
general purpose. Yeah, I mean, they do get better, but it's not replacing your job. But the way to go past that, or the way to go further, is to include capabilities of like domain knowledge. Like I talk about biology a lot.
Yep.
There's not a lot of publicly accessible biology information out there because it's either locked behind papers or it's in people's heads because it's a field of study.
Or proprietary data lakes.
Yeah. And so the way to get that data is to hire those people or to buy the data. And so we're starting to see that. It makes a lot of people uncomfortable, but it also makes the stuff better. And so it's a really interesting, I think we're at a really, really interesting precipice where we're seeing this technology unfold in real time. You have people who are just anti-AI. It feels very similar to what the Luddites were probably pitching, or the stenographers when movable type came out. But at the same time, it's like it's such a different technology in that it's able to process and put out so much more information than anybody would have ever thought imaginable. Like the printing press was industrialized, and you can print hundreds of pages a minute, but someone still has to read it, and you have to ship the book. And we don't have that problem with AI at all. You can improve the model. You spend a bunch of money on energy and electrons, and now all of humanity's biology knowledge is accessible effectively to anyone. And it's accessible in a way where you don't have to necessarily know what you're doing. You can ask it questions. You can ask clarifying, and the way that you interact with that knowledge is really special, I think. That being said, it's still really prone to making up. And so if you're in these domains where you need high specialty of knowledge, most people probably aren't going to know when it makes stuff up. So it's a really, really, I find it very exciting that we're going to make a lot more stuff accessible, but it also, given our current social appetites and political appetites, I'm very scared. Because we just, as humans, seem to not be able to function. And AI ain't going to change that. I don't think it's going to make it better.
Yeah. I mean, there are a few things that you commented on that I do want to touch upon, because some of the stuff is very close to at least one of the things that I was very heavily involved in. But the idea of bias, I want to go broad a little bit. And the reason why bias is important, at least from, I would say, like a scientific standpoint, is if you're running some sort of experiment to validate a hypothesis, but your data set or your test conditions are biased towards a specific outcome, you're not doing good science. So there is this element of you need to have that diversity of data set. You need to be able to consider wider scenarios than what you're focusing in on, just for the sake of how we do science. So from that angle, I think that's one of the reasons why at least addressing bias in training data is so important when it comes to these LLMs. And that kind of leads into this idea of why having LLMs that don't make stuff up or that aren't totally biased is important, is because a lot of people are now starting to look to LLMs as their knowledge retrieval mechanism.
Yeah.
Their first knowledge retrieval mechanism. And I know we talked about this before, where it's people are not using Google as much, or people are using an LLM and the LLM will sort or cite information, but no one really goes to check that information.
Yeah.
So as people are starting to adopt these LLMs as their first sort of layer of knowledge seeking, and they don't go and verify, if you have LLMs that are giving you wrong information, then that's what, quote unquote, you are training on. That's why it's so important to have this sort of grounding and validation behind it. Those are kind of things I wanted to mention. It is sort of on this scarier lens of what AI can do, but at the same time, bringing it back to what you were trying to comment on at the end, is it is increasing the accessibility to a lot of things that we did not used to have back when we were kids, back in my day.
Yeah, but I would say the same is true though, even for the internet. Like Google does a lot of editorial work to keep the search results relevant, which is bias. But you can still find all sorts of crazy on the internet, right?
Yeah.
And social networks are even worse because anyone now is posed. So instead of having an LLM hallucinate about biology, you have your like uncle who is a conspiracy theorist posting his conspiracy theories about viruses and vaccines. And then that actually, it seems to be treated and trusted way more than anything an LLM would spit out. And I feel like it's kind of like, I'm sure when you were growing up with the internet, it was the same thing. It was like stranger danger, don't talk to any random people on the internet. And now all we do is talk to random people on the internet. But I do think that in the early days of LLMs, people weren't really understanding these problems, and it was purported as it's artificial intelligence, it's computer, it's smarter than I am. Now I think people are really figuring out, it's really useful for certain things, but I need to probably check my law paper before I submit it to the court, or it's going to get fired for making up a bunch of stuff in the paper that didn't exist. So if you wanted to do your,
I think that's happened. People have submitted like legal documents. People have submitted legal documents drafted by LLMs that were totally made up.
But I literally just thought about this as I was saying that, in that if you wanted to do your job or do your work, it's terrible at it. But if you use it for making your work easier, better, faster, it's actually, that's where the use cases really are for me. I guess writing the code. If your job is to just write code and someone gives you a piece of paper that says, here's what you need to accomplish, and you write code for that, maybe your job's going away. But we've talked about this many times. Like, writing code is not the hard part of engineering. It's the everything else.
Yeah.
But if writing the code's faster and easier, you can iterate quicker, or other people on your team who are not engineers can do stuff that they would normally not be able to do. That theoretically makes everything a little bit better. So I think if your job is to take meeting notes in a meeting, you don't have a job anymore with AI. I would also say that that's not super valuable.
Yeah.
I think meeting notes are very valuable, but I use Gemini notes all the time, and it's incredible. It also fucks it up all the time. And I wish they wouldn't have action items, because it's ridiculous. Some of the shit it comes up with, I'm just like, wow, I was in that meeting and not at all correct. You still have but you can glean, like I was out on vacation and so I was able to basically
catch up,
read through a dozen meetings in 20 minutes and get rough idea of what happened versus having to sit there and listen to a recording or talk to a bunch of people about stuff. And then then the conversation becomes, hey, what did you talk about, or what was decided to, oh, I saw this thing in the meeting. Can you give me an update on that? Or what do you need from me? Or some other next step. So it's actually making progress happen faster. So I think we should really dive into this next time, because I see both sides of it, and I just take the approach of its technology, and it's going to inherently be how people use it. And I'm sure people will get up. We don't have a good track record of not catastrophizing technologies.
Yeah, I think it does go back to the idea of technology as a tool, and it depends how people use it. Right? As you're talking about nuclear, and then AI's power drain, having been involved in quote unquote innovative technologies when 3D printing was kind of being a thing. The 3D printed gun, that was a big thing, and then people all of a sudden, what is 3D printing doing? Yep. So you're always going to have these situations come up, and it's the nature of the world. Yes.
Yeah, 100%. It's the nature of the world. Maybe that'll be the episode title. Awesome. See you next time.
All right. Sounds good. Take care.
You can find us at 3reate.com. It's like the word create, but with a 3 instead of the C.